they were pretty impressed. I think, I'm not sure if that's when she started Sunday school with her kids or not.
Sure, either.
Wow. And she is still in the church
That's
today.
right.
And her husband, Gil, was saved, and the whole family was saved, and Gil is with the Lord today. In fact, I'll tell just a quick story, because I've known them all my life, basically, since that time. And Gil was Rudy on his deathbed the night that I was elected senior pastor. I'd gone there that afternoon. This was in May of 2004, and had visited Gil. And then, in fact, that night after I was elected, the first thing I did as senior pastor was go and visit him. And then the next day he passed away, and I was at the house and with Evelyn and the family. And Evelyn said, "I just want you to know that Gil voted for you." And she had turned in absentee ballots for her and Gil, and she said, "I know he would have wanted to vote for you," so he did. So Gil voted on his deathbed. He voted for me, so I thought that was a pretty good story.
Yeah. One of the highlights of being in our first church was we had evangelists come, Fuchsia Parish,
Mm-hmm.
and she came for 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
8 weeks she came. And I was a milkman. I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had church service every night. And I don't think I missed one church service of that whole 8 weeks. And her meetings lasted till around midnight. Would you say?
A lot of times.
11:30,
A lot of
12,
times.
A lot of times till midnight. I'd go home, sleep a couple hours, and get up at 2:45 and work all day. Come home, sleep in the afternoon for a while, and then go to church that night. It was a marvelous time.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
one of the real highlights of our early times of the church. God really blessed that church,
Yeah.
and a number of people came in during that time.
Yeah.
She can go down the aisle and pick out somebody right now. I remember going down the aisle, picking out somebody right now and telling them, "You ought to get right with the Lord," and things like that. And
Wow.
that was a fantastic 8 weeks we had
Yeah,
in
it
the
was,
church.
yeah. And she's still alive. Her name is...
No, she's dead.
Did she die?
She died about 2 years ago.
Can't...
I went back to Arizona one time for one of her conferences, and then she died but 2 years ago.
Fuchsia Parish Pickett.
Yes,
Yeah.
I don't know if she's still alive or not, but
Oh.
Sister Parrish did.
Oh.
So
Yeah, I was head usher at the time, and it was my responsibility to lock up, so then she'd get out early. He'd get out after 12 or so.
So you had to wait till everybody finished praying at the altar,
Oh.
and
I can
Yeah.
remember you and I'm and Joe and Eloise sitting in the Rainbow Cafe at 2 o'clock in the morning, still all
Yeah.
keyed up from the meetings
Yeah.
we went to.
Really?
Yeah.
Trying to
Really?
say
Yeah,
that.
then we were having pie and coffee, and then had to get up and go to work in the morning.
yeah. I remember that as a kid, going to those meetings every
Yeah.
night,
Yeah.
and being a part of that. Yeah. Well, as a kid, I do remember the spiritual impact too. But I remember Fuchsia Parish would preach and spit would fly out of her mouth.
yeah.
So all of us kids would try to make sure we didn't get that, or she'd get some spit going on her lips, and it would go up and down. So as a kid, you pay attention to other things sometimes than maybe some of the spiritual stuff going on. But I do remember that those times.
Me
well.
too, because one time she was preaching and she said she couldn't say Eloise. She always called her Eliase. She said, "Mel and Eliase, I want you down in the front row this particular time." So I went down and sat in the front row. I don't know why, and she spit on us all the time she was preaching back. So that is true.
So, yeah. So after a few years in the new building, things began to grow, and there was a building project. In what year did the first expansion happen?
1965. 4 years later, we were building the addition on the church to the south, which it was a one-story thing. Built a fellowship hall and Sunday school classes, and Lindsay had to have a Sunday school office and all that stuff. And then we put a tar roof on that, and it was that way for a little over a year. And then in '66 we built what is now the gym, a really nice sanctuary, which had a balcony. It seated 350 or something.
I believe
Would you
that's
say
correct.
that?
Yeah, rated at 350.
Yeah.
Him
Now,
and I was on the building committee, and when we seen that, it went right.
So did you have to buy more property at that time, or did,
Yeah.
Yes.
okay, so, and how did you get, was it the same people that sold you that next piece of property, or?
Wasn't
Yeah.
Raleigh Jackson that built that second part?
He worked, yes, he oversaw it, yes.
Oversaw it, yeah, that's what I
right,
thought.
And worked
Mhm.
on it, yes.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I believe it was the same ones that we dealt with.
so you got another acre of land, was it?
There was more than an acre because there was a small piece left over. And they didn't want just this little piece of land, so they talked us into buying the whole thing. So it was a little more than an
I
acre.
think it was, but it squared off everything. didn't
Right,
it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then we began buying, like we bought a 50-foot chunk on the north side, the strip that came through where our north driveway is now.
Uh-huh.
Yes, yeah.
And then another one on the south side, so
Okay.
we began fitting the pieces here and there.
Okay.
So how many acres are there now?
Was it 27 something, 77,
27, almost 28.
Yeah.
Really?
Right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I wonder, one of the highlights I was thinking about is the Daily Vacation Bible School.
Okay.
Eloise and Stella, and all, and
Yes.
we decorated the bus.
We had a parade downtown.
And parade all through Columbia Heights. Was it downtown
Oh,
too?
yeah, you wouldn't settle just for that. He probably had a standard dairy truck in the middle of the parade just for advertising.
That's good.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was fantastic. We had all decorated up and go through the.
And then you would have the vacation Bible school at the church for the neighborhood. Is that correct?
No, Monday through Friday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Monday
Yeah,
through
Monday
Friday.
through Friday and full, and, cause Esther had done a lot of that, hadn't she, when she?
Yeah, she was.
Run, before she banged
Uh-huh.
you, she would.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
I remember
good.
that, we have pictures somewhere of that parade.
Oh, do you?
We assembled in the parking lot down
Uh-huh.
there and headed out and had a big deal.
Mhm. Now we're getting into the era where I remember things, and one of the significant things that I remember was when I got baptized in water when I was 8 years old, which would have been about 64, I believe. And we didn't have a baptismal tank in the church at that time, so on Sunday nights after church we would go down to the Beacon Hill Baptist Church, and we would do
Beacon Hill?
Columbia Heights Baptist
Oh,
Church,
yeah, that's what I thought.
and do our baptismal services. So I was baptized in water at the Columbia Heights Baptist Church.
Mhm.
So that was
That's a
pretty
highlight.
neat, yeah, that was a pretty great experience as a kid, and I remember it very well. So that was a neat time. So
The one thing he hasn't brought up, but he will probably. Brother Mitchell used to teach our teachers training every year. And he used to sit right behind me in the teacher training, and we used to talk quite a bit. And Brother Mitchell asked me to pray one night, and or was that the
No, he said, will somebody close in prayer?
Oh, was that it?
So I leaned over Lindsay and said, he wants you to pray. So Lindsay, he'd been talking to Vivian, I think.
Yeah, Vivian.
So he jumps up and fires off this prayer and just, everybody got saved that night. That was pretty powerful.
Then the next night, down with the next night.
The next night, he actually called on Lindsay to pray, and Lindsay was talking again. So I leaned up and said, hey, Lindsay, he wants you to pray. He said, you're not getting me on that again. And finally, Vivian, I think, or somebody, or Maury, somebody leaned over and said, yes, he did call your name. So he had to pray too.
oh, so you didn't pay a whole lot of attention, is what you're trying to say.
Well, he is Sunday school superintendent.
Oh,
He didn't have to know anything.
He knew it all anyway.
Set an example.
Just like
Friendly.
Now I remember too that we'd have Sunday school competitions with a church up in Centralia, and we would get them on the phone and find out how many they had, and
Oh, that's right.
we
Yeah.
wore those buttons, didn't we?
yeah,
That was,
they would have actually a phone call to find out how many they had in Sunday school, and we were on a campaign to get more people in, and I don't remember what church it was. Do you remember what church?
no, I
But
don't.
Yeah,
it was somebody Pastor Mitchell had, And I remember that was the story that Lindsay would count pregnant women and
Yeah,
dogs that came in.
I always said if a dog ran through the parking lot, he counted him for Sunday school. And in fact, he counted him twice because he had 4 legs.
So, so that's true. So anyway,
Yeah.
so 67 was an expansion into the sanctuary that's now the gym.
66.
66. So
Yeah.
that was 66.
Yeah, I was 65 when we built the first
Okay.
one. And then the next year we did put up the big arches and,
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
did that.
Remember
So
that.
that was in I think, I'm not sure, but the fall of 66 probably.
Mhm.
We seem to do end up a lot of things in the fall.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
start things. And
We spent a lot of hours there at night.
a lot of,
Mhm.
I remember Dolores Rasmussen used to come up and cook dinner for us, and we'd work till 9, 10 o'clock at night. We'd go right from work.
Now that was when we were building the existing sanctuary.
Oh, really?
That Dolores did all that cooking.
Oh, does it
Yes,
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
right. And there
sorry.
was a lot of volunteer labor went on
Yeah,
during
there
that time.
was.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
tremendous help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other memorable things about that first church building and you know the things that happened during the 60s, those years?
I was going through my pictures the other day, and I believe it was in 1963, because James would have been 8,
Mhm.
and 62 or 63, and Brother Johnny Barnes, head of the Royal Ranger program, came out from Springfield to First Assembly, and so Pastor asked us to go down. We went down and attended the meeting that he was introducing the Royal Ranger program in Southwest Washington. And there was a fellow that was going to church, Kenny Watkins.
Mm.
He was a new convert, you know, but him and I went with Brother Mitchell, and so he got really excited, and we talked it over, and we decided that we would give it a try. And so we got all the information and all, and we formed the first Royal Ranger troop in Southwest Washington.
Wow.
That was a big program.
It was, yeah, and of course, like I say, with Kenny being a new convert, and he was pretty much an alcoholic to start with, so he backslid.
Mhm.
And I took over then as commander of it, and Marlon Ryder came on to help me.
Mm.
And so we had our group of Royal Rangers and trained them, and we went all over Southwest Washington introducing our program.
Wow.
They were a sharp group of kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had a drum, and
You were probably part of that at one time, weren't you?
Yeah, I don't think I was part of the first one.
No,
I think
Bill.
I was too young.
Bill was.
I know I have a picture in my office with I think with that gentleman from he must have come back because you were an established group then.
Yes, yeah.
And I know that Randy's in that picture
Yeah.
too.
Mm.
And Bill, and there's Arnie and Rob Mitchell
Right, yeah.
and Steve Parrish, I think, and that whole group. I think Arnie's in that picture.
Yeah.
Ronnie, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So the Royal Rangers began, and we're still going in our church with the Royal Rangers.
And missionaries.
And missionettes, that's
Yeah.
still all happening. So
But I led the group 5 years
Mhm.
because they had to be 8 when we started, you know, and 13 when we ended, because then
Right.
they had to go over to something else, either
Right.
Air Rangers, Sea Rangers, or
Yeah.
something. And we never had anything like that locally, so we just
Yeah.
kind of dropped it there. But it that was quite an experience, and something that I will always remember and be glad of
yeah,
is that through this I spent all that time with my boy
yeah, yeah,
and got all of that. But the sad thing is, I took account of the members that I had, and almost all of them are serving the Lord in one capacity or another.
Yeah.
You got Arnie, you got Steve Parrish, Bill,
Uh-huh.
one of the Steed boys.
Yes, I think
And
Eddie
I
was
think
in
Eddie
that.
Campbell, and of course Gary Kimber.
Mhm.
He's running the program back there
Yeah.
where he is on
Uh-huh.
the East Coast, and
That's,
so I was pretty proud of that,
that, yeah.
except for my son. But he still has that training and
Yes.
everything. And
Yes, he does. That's good.
So
That's
we
good.
just keep praying to the Lord, you know, that
Mhm.
He'll recognize his needs.
That's good.
You know, I hate to put out names in case I miss somebody and like that, but I want to say how much I appreciate Sharon Brotherton, the secretary, Lois Stevens
Yeah.
is the secretary. They did a terrific job. Down in the South.
Sharon Brotherton was there at that time?
She was in our secretary for our Sunday school when I was there.
Really?
In the, that was like, I think Brotherton's came in the early '70s.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
So it'd be
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, wow.
One,
Wow.
while we're talking about the '60s, that was when we started the first young people's group in our church.
Really?
Pastor Mitchell came and asked.
CAs.
Oh,
Yeah,
see, Christian
she-
pastors.
Yeah, she
Right,
asked
yeah.
Eloise and I. He asked Eloise and I if we would start it. So we ended up and every Friday night we had a young people's meeting in the parsonage.
Really?
So Mitchells were always there too. So
Yeah.
we ran all over town picking up kids.
Yeah.
Just recently, I ran into a lady who lives in Spokane now, and she's 55 years old now, and
She was in the young people?
yeah, she was in our young people's group. She's coming. She wants to come back. That's Carla I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Carla Lee was her
Oh,
name.
Yeah,
Carl, I
yeah,
know
She
Carl.
wants to come back for the anniversary.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a lot of running around and picking up.
And
kids.
and that was something that was a little unusual too, in that the CAs, the whole church was CAs.
Yeah. 13 to 35.
Right.
Yeah.
13 to 35.
Yeah.
And Pastor Mitchell was the only one that was older, but he was pastor, so he attended him.
Yeah.
You were all young people at
Yeah, I
that
had the same
time.
thing. I was young people's leader in Kelso Church, and that's what they had, 13 to 35.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But they always had what they called junior CAs or something
Yes,
that was
yeah.
a teenage group.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we were part of when we were growing
Right.
up.
Because I remember going to those meetings. Did you have some of them in the sanctuary ever? Did you ever move over? Because
All I remember is we
Okay.
did an awful lot of them in Mitchell's home.
Yeah.
We had those Friday night. We
Yeah.
had kids like Janice Clark. I mean, what's the oldest girl's name?
Candy.
Candy Clark, and we had different
wow.
that group in there. Heather,
Yeah.
Heather Mitchell.
Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
Dave?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Pastor Mitchell was there till what, 71?
71.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of a shock, wasn't it, when he resigned, or was that something you knew was coming? Or
I think we knew it was
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, yeah.
mm-hmm. So
I think he felt like he'd taken the church as far as he
Good.
could and wanted to, you know.
Mhm.
So he went back up to Vancouver and took over a pretty big church up
Big
there.
evangelical tabernacle.
Evangelist Tabernacle.
Yeah.
Or was it Evangel? Was it?
so that brought change to the church, and then the search for a new pastor. So how did that go? What's your recollections of that?
Another Canadian.
Another Canadian.
Wasn't Tom?
Anyway, Tom Johnstone was a brother-in-law to Brother Mitchell.
Yeah, it was
And-
Ruth Mitchell's brother.
Yeah, Ruth Mitchell's brother.
Yeah.
And see, he said, there's a guy back in Ontario that you might be interested in. Minor. And what did we go from there?
Well, he was general. It wasn't Tom Johnstone, general superintendent. of
Yes, he was
Canada?
general
Canada,
superintendent, yeah.
And so he knew Mitchell's, and he knew what our church. He'd been here, and he knew what our church, the direction it was taking, and everything. And then, so that's why he recommended
Yeah.
Dave Minor.
You remember that
Yeah.
better than I do.
Yeah.
Jack was in Bible college up in North Vancouver, and I had been up visiting, and we came back by Brother Mitchell's place, and he had a meeting that he had to get to, and of course we just stopped for an hour or so to visit on the way, and he had gone and got in his car, and he come running back before we drove off, and he said, "Oh, by the way," he said, "I was talking to Brother Johnstone this weekend, and he said that there is a man in Ontario that you might want to contact because he thinks that he would be a man for the church."
Mm.
And gave us the name, and the number, and so then we came down and contacted him. He sent a letter.
Mm-hmm.
But that is way across the United States and in another country, so we just kind of shelved that letter.
So you had other people coming in trying out for the
I
church?
think there was 20-something of them, if I remember
Was it
correctly.
really?
All during that last few months of after about the middle of the summer. From then on, we had a lot of people come through, to try out for pastor, and nobody clicked with us until finally the board brought that letter out. It's recommended Pastor Minor, and so that's the time when the board said we couldn't afford to fly him out here. We were having a business meeting, and so I got up and said, well, I'll give $100, and I know Lindsay will too. Put him on the spot. He didn't have any choice. And I think Andy Anderson jumped up and different ones said they would.
Well, as I remember, the last two that came and tried out got a unanimous no.
Really?
And we called the district, and they didn't have anybody else that they could recommend.
It wasn't a good selection coming through there.
No,
I
it
felt
was
so,
not.
I felt so strongly that Brother Minor should be the one that come. I said, if nobody else will finance him coming, I will.
Yeah.
But Melvin helped us out.
Lindsay didn't have any
Well,
choice.
I don't, I was on the board at the time, and Leroy McCann, And when we had our meeting, and that was a unanimous no on that person, where do we go from here,
Yeah.
And so we didn't have anything. I said, well, we got that letter in there. It's been laying in there for 2 or 3 months.
Now that was a letter that Pastor Minor had written to you guys?
No, the Johnstone.
John Stone,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. So,
And so that's when we, these
Yeah.
guys decided, well, we could afford to get him out here, so.
so when did he come?
Well, he came in the fall of 1970, wasn't it? And no,
72, I believe.
Yeah, he actually arrived in but it was the fall of '71 that he came and tried it out. And there again, we had trouble getting him here because of the laws and
Yeah.
the citizenship things and all that stuff. And he arrived in January or February of that next year, which would be '72.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't he agree to come, but then he had to decide if he was going to take it once he was voted in?
Yes, I remember that too. Lindsay got him on the phone, and weren't you at our house? We had that meeting that night.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Lindsay
Now-
got him on the phone and said, you're elected, and he said, well, I'll think about it.
Yeah, he'll think about it, exactly.
Here are all these guys that wanted the church weren't elected, and then
Took the wind out of
the
our
guy you
sails.
elected
Yeah.
had to decide.
Then the big thing was that he wanted to bring his youth pastor with him.
Mhm.
And once again, the argument came that we couldn't afford a youth pastor, and I remember a meeting we went through with that.
Yeah.
And so that's when he brought Jerry Wilson with
Mhm.
him.
Now, was that shortly after he came? I remember that because
Well, Wilson came with him. They came
oh,
together.
they came
yeah.
together. Okay, I got to interject a little story I have because when Pastor Minor came to try out, I think I was a sophomore in high school, and I really wasn't serving the Lord like I should have been at that time. And I remember the Sunday night service. He preached Sunday morning and Sunday night. And Sunday night he was preaching on the second coming. And I remember that so well because as he preached, I began to be under such heavy conviction. And of course, he was talking about if you missed the second coming, you missed it, and you didn't have a chance. And so I remember praying that he would stop preaching and give the altar call so I could get to the altar and get my heart right with the Lord. And so that I look back at that night was really a turning point in my life, and to where I really gave my life over to the Lord, from that moment on. So that was I remember that's an accurate story. I was praying that he would stop preaching and get to the altar call because it was such a heavy conviction that night. So
And Jerry Wilson played a good part in your
Yes, he
development during
did.
that 2
yes,
years
he
too,
did.
didn't he?
So yeah.
Jerry Wilson didn't stay very long, did
2
he?
years.
2 years in all.
And he was really the first paid
Youth pastor.
youth pastor and associate for that matter. I
Yeah,
guess.
right. That's That's exactly.
Because I remember before he came, was it Gary Clevenger that
Yes.
the first season led the youth group, and we had the Believers Choir
Mhm.
that sang, and
Yeah.
We went up to the fairs and did.
that's where we used to make faces at Lindsay when he was playing his tuba in the worship choir.
Baritone.
And then Esther came and chewed us out because we were making him laugh and he couldn't play. Oh, the good old, that was Mick Bruce when I used to say.
Yeah, I know you did.
You know, I was thinking too back in the back to the '60s, but I remember this could have been early '70s too. But when we would have Sunday school, and you would drive the Sunday school bus and pick up kids around the city, and then you would go after Sunday school, take them to deliver them
Take
back
'em
home. And Mick Brusco and I used to ride with you a lot.
Yeah, stop by Standard Dairy.
And you'd always stop by Standard Dairy and take us in and steal an ice cream for us. You'd give us an ice cream, and that was we used to love doing that. That was. And I remember
fun.
too going to youth camp at Mayfield, and Maury coming up with the bus, driving us up there, and then coming to pick us up and taking us home. That was probably a different bus than the old gray one, but
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This was a new modern bus.
yeah. So those were pretty good times and great memories of what God was doing in the church, and so that was pretty exciting. But anyway, when Pastor Miner came, things changed. What happened in the church at that point in time?
Well, we had an explosion, really.
Yes,
The
we
church grew so fast that we packed out that new sanctuary. Well, it wasn't real new then, but anyway, we packed it out. We had a full house.
200.
It was during the charismatic time, and we had people like Father Bennett from Episcopal
I remember
deal
him,
from
yeah.
Seattle, who was filled with the Holy Spirit, and then some Episcopal man from Clatskanie used to come over. We had a Catholic nun coming. It was
Yeah.
that was quite a time.
So it was a I do remember that it was a time of growth, and God really began to just do a lot of exciting things, and
So that's why within 10 years we were in another building project.
and that started in '75, correct?
Yeah, right.
To build the sanctuary and all the classrooms underneath that we already occupy right now.
Right.
Mm.
And I remember that very well. In fact, my wife and I were, I think, the first couple to get married in that church, in the new sanctuary. It was in 1976.
Really?
Yeah.
May
We
22nd.
were married in May, and I think we went in January or February, wasn't it?
I don't remember exactly.
It was, I think it was the first part of '76 when we went in there. But those were good years.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a great group of young people. God was moving in the CA group,
Right.
and
Then we moved into that new sanctuary that seated, what did we say, 600 people? I don't know.
Mhm.
We may be stretching it, but anyway, it was full the first Sunday.
Yeah,
First,
Yeah.
it really was.
Put chairs out.
Yeah.
and it was also during that time. I think it was '74 when Gary Lindbergh came.